Well, welcome to the Rancocas Nature Center. During these days of COVID-19, we are very challenged. What we hope to do today is to take you on a virtual walk of some of the really wonderful big trees that we have here in the Rancocas State Park. So some of the trees are on the Rancocas Nature Center property and others are just outside the boundaries in the park. We're going to have a chance to kind of walk around, look at some of these trees, and learn a little bit about how to ID trees. And then you'll be able to come and download the map and a leaf edge identifier to be able to do this walk on your own. So you'll have this as your guide, but then you'll be able to come and do a self-guided hike whenever you choose. To start our hike, we want to just learn a little bit about some of the ways to ID trees. And the vast majority of trees are what we have as alternate branching, meaning that you have a branch coming from one spot, and then rather than being right opposite, it will go up the branch a little bit before the next little branch will spout out. So this is a really nice example of alternate branching. The second type of branching that is very uncommon, and really the acronym that we use to remember it, is Mad Horse. So it's maples, ash, dogwood, horse chestnut, and then also buckeye and one or two others like Paulownia, which is not a very common tree. But this is an example of where this is a maple branch, and you can see that wherever there is a branch, there's one opposite. So here's a little tiny one. There are leaves also sprouting out with the same position. So that is opposite branching. We have the tulip tree here behind me, and one of the definitive characteristics of the tulip tree is that it has a very nice, straight, tall trunk. You'll notice that the bark is kind of furrowed, very indented, and the leaves are sort of the shape of a tulip. In June, this tree is going to flower. It is, the flowering is monoecious, meaning that both the male and the female flowers are on the same tree. And in this case, the tulip tree flower is a perfect flower, and the male and female parts are both on the same flower. So a little bit different, kind of unusual in nature. It will flower, as I said, in June. One of the things to remember is that if you want to plant a tulip tree, do not plant it near anything, like don't plant it near your deck or where you park your car. The flowers are extremely sappy. The bees and some of the other insects really love all that sap, but it drips off and you're going to end up with all that sticky sap on either your deck or your driveway or your car. So you want to plant it somewhere where it's not going to be an inconvenience. I brought a yardstick so that we could get some concepts of some of the size of these trees. A really nice general rule of thumb is for every inch of growth of the tree trunk, every inch is approximately about 10 years worth of growth. And that's a very general rule, but it does give you a kind of a nice guideline. So you'll see here, and we only want to measure from the middle of the tree to the edge of the tree, not the entire diameter, just half of it, which would be the radius. And so here approximately we have, I would say, somewhere around, easily, I would think here. I would say we have approximately 21, 22 inches, which means that this tree is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 220 to 230 years old. We've walked along the driveway to beyond the birdseed shed, and this is our second tree today on our big tree walk. This is called an American beech. It is very easy to identify because of the nice smooth gray bark. Also in the winter, it is one of the last trees to lose its leaves and holds on to its leaves, and they tend to be a very beigey gray color, which actually, if you do any winter photography, it's kind of nice when all the other trees are bare to have that little bit of beigey gray color in a photograph. And you can see that the leaf is oval shaped with a point on the end, and we say that this is a toothed leaf. So the edge of the leaf is like a saw blade with little teeth. This tree will flower in, or has flowered in May. It also is monoecious, meaning that both the male, as we said, the male and the female flowers are both on the same tree. Not a perfect flower like the tulip, but with two sets of flowers, male and female. One of the interesting characteristics, I think, is that if you look at the base of the tree, it almost looks like the foot of an elephant. When I look at that, that's kind of what it reminds me. So that's another way that you can tell. One of the issues with beech is that sometimes they're very prone to having people carve initials or names or slogans or whatever into the side of the tree. That's not really good for the tree. Bark is meant to protect the tree from insects and disease. It's also meant to hold water from, so that it doesn't evaporate too quickly. And by scarring into the tree, you are injuring it to some extent. Most trees don't get so affected by it, but that's, it is better not to do that. So if you are so inclined to carve your initials in a beech tree, refrain from it. We've hiked down the Yellow Trail in a westerly direction, past our small meadow and our beehives, and on the right side of the trail is the remnants, what's left over of an old white oak tree, Quercus alba. It is part of the white oak group family, and what defines the white oak group is that their acorns mature in 1 year, and their lobed leaves have rounded edges rather than pointy edges. This tree is probably well over 300 years old, maybe 325, and it was damaged in the storm. Well, it actually came down, it was damaged first prior to 2012 when Superstorm Sandy was here in New Jersey, but it came down. The Nature Center really did not have a lot of damage from Superstorm Sandy, but about a month later, 3 weeks later, the rest of this tree, half had already come down and blocking the trail. We had to reroute the trail, but this then, about a month after Sandy, we ended up losing the rest of the tree. So what remains, though, is kind of an interesting look. Kind of looks like it's crying out like, oh my goodness, what happened? It sort of has a ghosty look. But white oaks have, they are very long-lived. They can be a very large tree. And if you're looking to plant a tree for your grandchildren, that's a great tree to plant so that they'll have the chance to enjoy it just like you did. We've hiked down the Yellow Trail heading west. We've crossed over the bridge over one of our small streams in our park, and probably only about 100 or so feet beyond the bridge, we find a stand of American holly. American holly is a native tree in this area. There actually are quite a few of them as you get closer down to the creek. It can be identified by its smooth bark, not quite as smooth as the beech is, but somewhat similar. Hollies grow very, very slowly, so that even though this tree, has a diameter of about the radius would be probably somewhere around 12, 21, probably about 10 or 11 inches, which would indicate that it would be 11 inches would be 110 years old. It probably is much, much older than that. I have heard that this stand of hollies, and if you look around, you'll see that there are a number of older hollies here, is one of the oldest stands of holly in Burlington County. The tree can also be identified. It is an evergreen. It does not lose its leaves in the fall like the deciduous trees do. It is identified by its oval leaf that has very, very spiky spiky toothed edges, and they're stiff and shiny, very different from a regular leaf, which is one of the reasons why it has the ability to hold the water, and it remains on the tree over the winter. One of the interesting things about holly is that it does have male and female trees. So the flowering is dioecious, meaning that there are two trees. There are male trees and female trees. Male flowers are on male trees. Female flowers are on female trees. If you do not have a male and a female within approximate, so that the pollen can transfer, you will not have fruit on the female trees. So that's one of the ways to identify females from males in the winter, is by the nice red berries that form on the holly trees during the winter. It's a great food source for many of the birds who are able to digest waxy berries. Robins, cedar waxwings, some of the birds that can digest the berries. So from the beach stand where we were, we've hiked, instead of going to the left and staying on the yellow trail, we veered off to an unmarked trail that goes off to the right. And we've headed west. So we are now over the Rancocas Nature Center property line, according to the map, and we are on the Rancocas State Park property. Behind me, we have a very, very large, it's possible that this was 3 trees growing together, or it's possible that it split and had 3 trunks when it was very young. But in any case, this is probably one of the largest trees that we have here. I can hold up my yardstick, but you'll see that it doesn't even come close to measuring. This is a really, really big tree. It is a chestnut oak. It's in the white oak group, so it has acorns that are going to mature in 1 year. The leaf, though, instead of being a traditional oak leaf that is lobed with rounded edges being in the white group, it has a leaf that has a rounded toothed edge. So it is oval in shape, point on the end, but the toothed edges are very, very, very rounded. And that's a good way to tell the tree. The bark is kind of gnarly and furled. It has lots and lots of cracks. Of course, this is a very mature tree, and their bark does get darker and more deeply sort of cut in and furrowed as it ages. So this tree, it's very difficult to tell how old this tree might be. If we use the traditional method of 1 inch to 10 years of growth, then we probably are in the range of maybe 400, because here's 36 and we're not halfway. So we're easily into the 400 range. This tree sits just beyond the property that there was a mansion that was built in 1859. Cousins of the family who built the Rancocas Nature Center, which that also was in 1859 completed, and it would have sat to the left of this tree. So there's an area here. It is no longer standing. The house was demolished in 1966. But this would have been certainly on their property at that time, and a very mature tree, even when that family was here in the late 1800s. So we are now at the back loop of the Blue Trail, not very far from the creek, which would be on my left. And in front of, we're not quite yet at marker number 12. We've passed marker 13. We're not quite at 12. And in the middle of the trail here, or actually on the side of the trail, is an American sycamore. So this tree has an extremely large base. If I hold my ruler up, I think that easily it could probably be about 350 years old. If that's approximate age, then it would have been a sapling in 1670. So it's seen quite a bit, a lot of changes here. And that would have been probably when the colonists were around. So the tree is very easily identified by its mottled bark. This is a very old tree and it's lost a lot of its bark, but if you see younger trees, normally the trunk is very straight and tall. It is a large tree. It can get really large. And the leaf is somewhat like a maple leaf. It is lobed, but it only really has about 3 lobes. It has little fruit balls in the fall that will dangle down, eventually falling to the ground, and then when they dry out, the little ball will expand and the seeds will scatter. It is monoecious, meaning that the flower has male and female flowers on the same tree, and it flowers in May. It has alternate branching, true as most tree species have. It sits in a very interesting spot here. The land does kind of go down to the creek, so we're hoping that we don't lose it. It has lost a number of its branches already, but it still seems to be hanging in there. Now, we are now back close to the visitor center behind the old barn, which is next to the parking lot. And behind me is another one of our very old trees. This one is a willow oak. So it is in the oak family. The willow oak is part of the red or black group. The acorns take 2 years to mature. This tree is probably, I would say, we kind of measure, you can see when we hold the ruler up, it easily is about maybe 325 years old, easily. But this tree has been around for a while. One of the characteristics of the leaves is that they are very long and narrow. So they are not a typical oak leaf, which would be lobed. It's in the black, the red group, the red oak group, but it doesn't have that traditional vein extending beyond the edge of the leaf. Like if you look at it at a regular red or black oak, you'll see that it's very, very lobed leaves with the veins extending beyond the end. And for the size of this tree, you would expect that it probably would have some decent sized acorns, but in reality the acorns are extremely tiny. They're only maybe about not even 3/8 of an inch long. It flowers in May. The male and female flowers are on the same tree, so it's a monoecious flowering, and it has alternate branching. We're back at the Nature Center now, and behind me is, I wanted to include this tree in our hike today because it is a red maple. It is also a very old tree. It's not in very great shape, but it is the only tree on our tour today that exhibits opposite branching. It also has a very unusual, it's one of the unusual species where some individuals can exhibit monoecious flowering, meaning that the male and the female parts are both on the same tree, which is a little less common, or more common would be that there are male and female trees. So then you would have your male flowers on one tree and your female flowers on another. The leaf is very distinctive. It has 3 lobes, and if we can see here, let me put the down. If you can see here, it has 3 lobes, 1, 2, 3, pointed edges, and one of the things is that it's approximately as wide as it is high, so you can draw a circle around it. Let's take our ruler and see if we can come up with approximate age here. I would say that we are at, this one is probably somewhere around 270 years old, 75 years old. I think we're sort of at the middle here. Maybe a little more, maybe almost 300. So you can see here, quite holding up the ruler, how large of a trunk this has. The bark changes from a younger tree to an older tree. It is not quite as furrowed and deep. The bark doesn't have as deep ruts as some of the oak trees do. But as it gets older, the bark does darken. And we'll see here. This is a tree that has had a lot of damage, and we don't cut it down. It's still we've topped it, but we've kind of kept it here. And there have been many a year where it's been home to nesting flying squirrels.